how did Iron Maiden start? How did you get into being the lead vocalist of Iron Maiden?
Well, I was hired. I mean, to put it bluntly, I mean, because the band started in 1975, and so I didn't join till like 1980. Okay, so from between 1975 and 1980, the band was the equivalent of a revolving door in terms of people coming in, people going out. There were like however many lead singers, and they said, but cutting a long story short, 1979, their first album came out, was an instant success. And then they did the second album, Killers. That was an instant success. I was in a band in parallel to them called Samson, which is where Sasha used to bump into me going to sort of like late night clip joints, in Soho, in Wardour Street.
And I was 15, and he was a rock star. And I
Yes.
underage, so we were doing all this kind of stuff. And basically, most of the bands, the Anvils, the Samsons, the Iron Maidens, the whoever it was, Saxon, and so on and so forth, all these bands knew each other. We all toured together. We all kind of hung out together a little bit. And some became more successful than others. Iron Maiden became top of the pile and were doing really well in festivals, things like that, all the rest of it, big theatres, European tours, world tours, went to America, came back, went back to America again, all this stuff. The band I was in, Samson, we did 3 albums, and we had an intimate knowledge of every toilet in UK in which it was big enough to play a concert. So we didn't really go anywhere, but Maiden were going to fire their vocalist, and they were looking for a new one, and they knew me because we shared the same drummer, and he joined. It was all very incestuous, and so they basically asked me, did I fancy coming for an audition to see if I would want the job. And this is very strange because the manager, a guy called Rod Smallwood, who's a very intimidating, grumpy guy, his entire life's work is Iron Maiden and still is. So this is a guy that got an award. I actually had to give the speech, and we're sitting at a dinner. So I'll tell you, this is who Rod is. He gets given an award for being best manager on the planet at some convention of rock managers all over the place. So he sat at this dinner, and he's next to me, and I'm sort of scribbling little notes down on a bit of paper. And he goes, "What are you writing?" I said, "Oh, nothing. He goes, "I bloody hate these dinners. I hate these. I've never, oh, God, I just saw all these repellent people just think they're so up their own arse. I'm thinking he's going to get the award in a minute. He's like, "What are you writing?" I'm like, nothing. And then this guy comes up to him and says, "Hey, Mr. Smallwood, I'm a huge admirer of you, and I really admire your work and your dedication and your this." And he just turned to the guy and went, "Who the fuck are you?" And the guy went, "Well, he said, "You think I'm in the music business, don't you?" And the guy went, "Well, yeah." He said, "I'm not in the music business. I manage Iron fucking Maiden. Now, fuck off." Right? Honestly, if you've seen Death of Stalin, Marshal Zhukovsky in Death of Stalin, that is Rod Smallwood. Okay, take him out and shoot him.
Oh my God.
So anyway, this is this guy, and he invites. I've just done a show with Samson at Reading Festival. Okay, not headlining, but halfway up on a Saturday. In the audience is this guy, Rod, and Steve, who's the guy that started the band. It's kind of his band. So
Steve Harris.
Yeah. So Steve is watching the performance and goes, "I told you, look, he's a good guy. You should get this guy. This is what we want." And Rod's like, "Well, I don't know. I'm not convinced." So I'm summoned to his hotel room that evening after, we've had a few beers. And he says, "I want to talk to you about something." Sits me down and goes, "I'm offering you the chance to audition for Iron Maiden." Now, I have no idea how my 20-year-old self came up with the sort of chutzpah to open my mouth and say what I did say. And I said, "Well, let's not beat about the bush, shall we? Because you're not really offering me the job because you know I'll get it. I said, so my question to you is not, do you want me? Is not do I want to be in Iron Maiden? It's whether or not the band are actually going to be able to tolerate what I'm going to be like when I get in Iron Maiden. I said, because I'm not going to be the same like the old guy. If what you want is some little guy to just be nice, turn up and not have any opinions, find somebody else. Because I've got a lot of ideas, I've got a lot of things I'd like to change around, and I'm sure people are not going to be happy. But if what you want is not that, then find somebody else.
It's pretty self-aware for a 20-year-old.
And he went, I
like this guy.
For drugs. And I turned them down,
like a proper singer.
And that was that. And we did go and have an audition, although it didn't feel like it. We just went and ended up singing all the Maiden songs, and then all the songs from bands that we liked as well. We covered all those because we had so many points of contact. And that was it, and the rest is kind of history. It all went.
Can I also cut to the fans' point of view? So I'm a 15-year-old fan, and Iron Maiden have blown up. Bruce is a very well-known singer in Samson, and it's a very big, high-profile story that he's left Samson to join Iron Maiden. The previous singer, Paul Di'Anno's left. Everyone liked him. He was a bit of a punk, but the voice, some people loved it, other people didn't. When I went to see Bruce fronting Iron Maiden at the Hammersmith Odeon in about 1981 or 2, it would have been, I can't remember, they used to call Bruce the Siren. They still do.
Yeah, the air raid siren.
The air raid siren.
Yeah.
His voice shook the Hammersmith fucking Odeon. Like, it was...
Jesus.
A certain amount of assistance from a microphone.
With a microphone. No, but it was like, who's this guy with that band? And it was like two kind of incredible kind of superheroes coming together.
That actually, it's very interesting in terms of propaganda. That thing that the manager had this big thing that on the back of every album, everybody had to have some kind of nickname. So nobody was ever Fred Blocks,
Bruce, right.
The something Blocks, right? Even if they. So. In my case, he said, we'll call you. And somebody had written a letter to a music paper saying that they'd seen me at my inaugural gig in the Rainbow Theatre in London when we sort of introduced me, as it were. And it was a letter saying, this is the most awful thing I've ever seen. It was awful. It was a travesty. I hate the new singer. He sounds like a cross between a cement mixer and an air raid siren. And Rogers went, we'll repurpose that, the human air raid siren, that was that.
I mean, that's branding. That's for sure. Now, that's going into branding really quickly. Who came up with Eddie the Head? Because that was such an amazing that imagery. I mean, I was like, in 80? I was in first, second, third grade, and you would see these images of Eddie the Head. You're just like. And for people not understanding what the 80s were like, I mean, that was terrifying for a lot of, because heavy metal was the devil's music, obviously, and all of that stuff that was going on. Yeah.
Best tunes, I mean, but so this is really lost in the midst of time. Like most things, no one person has the light bulb moment. And says, I'm going to give you the whole thing. There you go, all on a plate. Here's Eddie. Here's your concept. No. What happens is one or two events happen and somebody goes, oh, hang on a minute. If we put this together with that, we've got this, which is how Eddie was invented. So running through it, when our manager, Rod, saw the band in the early days, very early days, way before me, when they were playing pubs, and they literally had little wooden crates with lights in them and things like that. They'd somehow managed to acquire a kabuki mask, right? Japanese kabuki mask, which was over the head of the drummer with a hole in the mouth, through which they piped at some point during the song Iron Maiden, I think it was. smoke came out of the mouth, and I think a bit of blood came down, and it was like, super cheap, like high school rock show stuff, right?
Right.
And that was it. And that was cool because they're all largely from East London. So, as you know, from the Long Good Friday, which name changed by Sasha, people from East London, they don't remember murder when you talk. They just talk like this all the time, which is why everybody has subtitles for people from the East End of London when you have to do interviews with CNN, right? The whole thing about Eddie was he was known as the Kabuki Mask. He wasn't called the Kabuki Mask. He was called the Ed. No H, the Ed. So, we're going to have the Ed's flashing in a minute, right? And then smoke's going to come out, right? So that was the Ed. Now, Rod comes along, sees that and goes, yeah, the mask's kind of cool. Yeah. Now, Rod's a rugby player. He plays in this rugby team, club rugby. I think one of his buddies at the rugby club knows that Rod is into music. And he goes, I don't know. I've got this guy works in my office. He draws all these weird pictures and stuff and stuff. I don't know. Is it any good? I don't know. What do you think? You're in this kind of world. It's this guy, Derek Riggs, who is the artist that originally draws Eddie. But, of course, the Eddie is like the mask, and Rod's putting together basically the whole concept of an existence, if you like, of a primal force, because that's what's in the pictures. Now you have a mask with a primal force. We created a mask. In actual fact, in the early days, some roadie would put on the mask and wander out with a light shining it on the audience, going like that, right?
Right.
Then we go further down the road, and our lighting director had been to an opera festival in Blindbourne, I think it was. Anyway, they had giants on stage, and there were guys, in contraptions that made these giant monsters walking around. He goes to the guys and said, could you build me a giant that looks like this? And that was the first time we ever had a giant walk-on monster Eddie. And I'll never forget the moment when they unveiled it and the roller shutter kind of came up in the theater, and we were all standing there going, oh my God, and that just blew the doors off people's minds when they saw that on stage. And we've continued to do that, ever since. But Eddie's acquired this entire existence because, of course, you can place him in any period, So we had a whole visual pun where the top of his head was shaved and sutured back on like Frankenstein. He's in a padded cell and piece of PIEC of mine, and we get people saying, "Hey, dude, why's Eddie had a haircut?" And it would be like, well, you see, it's like, oh fuck, if we have to explain it, let's move on. Then ancient Egypt. Yeah, let's put Eddie in ancient Egypt. Let's have him like bang, boom, Then we had a kind of homage to Blade Runner on the next one. And that was the inspiration for the lighting rig, was Blade Runner. And we had lots of Spinal Tap moments with inflatables that weren't very advanced technology at the time. So we had the deflated Apollo and astronaut flying above everybody's heads, looking like a very sad condom. You
read my mind. You read my mind. I was thinking, it probably looked like a sad condom.
Right. We had on the Somewhere in Time tour, which is the that's the one. We had. I wore this stage outfit, which is best described as something I designed whilst the balance of my mind was disturbed. We had these big hydraulic hands that came up on platforms. You could stand in each hand, and of course the hand inflate like this, big claws coming up, Eddie. So the whole stage became a giant Eddie as the head came up like a big kill. All great, except that again, early technology. Unfortunately, the big head came up and looked sometimes, dependent upon the voltage, going into the pumps. It would sometimes look a little bit like a bin liner, or alternatively, the hands would come up and it would come up like, "Whoa," and it's supposed to do this, and instead it would just go, "Whoa," like that. And then you would wait, and they're like, "Okay, fine, yeah, that's kind of funny," So we'd all seen Spinal Tap, which we all thought was very funny because it was actually quite real.
Did you? But the question is, did you put it up to 11? That's the question. Did you ever put it up to 11?
Did you put it up to 11? Those we always, yeah. I mean, although the roadies used to put it up to 11 because. Started marking 11 and little,
They did. They did, right? That's a thing, right? They actually.
Because we all loved that film. The only thing that pissed us off about the film was that people thought that we didn't get it. Mm-hmm. And people would ask us questions like, "Did you think Spinal Tap was funny?" I went, "Yeah."
It's hilarious.
And some people would, obviously had such a minimal sense of humor. And they were so serious about everything. They were just like, "Oh my God, they think it's funny," But then you get the other side of it, which are all those sort of like new wavy type, people who would go, those heavy metal people, they're so stupid, they're so moronic, they're just so. Right. Spinal Tap was so clever. Oh, they think it's funny too. Well, yeah, well, we're better than you are, so I mean, we'll see you at Glastonbury. Oh, we won't. No.
So the hipsters of their day.
School. You got to understand. When I was at school, Bruce is right. There was a lot of people who looked down their noses at metal. Right. I was a massive metal fan. I would go to the Marquee. I was lucky enough to see an incredible amount of bands. I would go to Hammersmith Odeon, see Maiden. By the way, seeing Maiden live, particularly as a 15-year-old, but at any age, it's like a jet landing on your head. It is so loud and so powerful and so intense, right? Mm-hmm. And it's, as anyone, it just makes a massive impression on you. I would go back to school. They would laugh at me.
I've had implants put in now.
So that you could do that properly.
Metal implants, so I could be more metal.
So he could be more metal,
literally. No, I have.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a new hip.
Yes.
I mean, but it is therefore heavy metal.
I never knew he was so metal.
At least I've got 6 inches of titanium hammered into me, dude. You know what I mean? How serious is that?
It is pure metal. It is pure metal.
Very quick related Anvil story. This is a true story. When Anvil came out in 2008-9, it was the 20th anniversary or 25th anniversary actually of Spinal Tap.
Okay.
And Spinal Tap were doing the interview circuit. Anvil was around. And they said, whatever you do not ask about Anvil. We do not want to hear about Anvil. Don't ask them any questions. They lost their sense of humor about it. So they wouldn't do anything. So MTV, which bought Anvil in the end, right? MTV, and VH1, which bought Anvil, they thought, fuck it, we're going to ask Spinal Tap about Anvil. And so I have the video footage of when the MTV journalist brings up Anvil, which they've specifically said, do not mention. And the reporter goes, "So, Nigel Tufnell, Spinal Tap, what do you think of Anvil?" And he goes, "It's like being crushed by a giant piece of art."
That's a great...
Angry. But I love that Spinal Tap lost their sense of humor.
Yeah, exactly.
That's absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Now,
that's the danger of it, of assuming that you're a superior species because you can laugh at other people. It's just yourself the whole time.
Exactly.
I think at one point in our lives we are the ones laughing, and many parts of our lives they're laughing at us, and that's just the way the world works.
That's life. If everybody could accept that, there wouldn't be any more people fighting each other. We'd just be laughing at each other and falling over. You know what I mean? But
we're just all trying to figure this out, man. This is a heavy look. This entire thing called life is a pretty heavy trip. We're trying to just deal with it on a mental level, a spiritual level.
And just when you think you've got it figured out, it's like dead.
Right. I think I got.
Thank you for this message of hope from Iron Maiden tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
Just when you figure out life.
I'm just saying,
that's when the Reaper comes for you.
If we weren't, we are we're well-educated chimpanzees with iPads and nuclear weapons, you know. I mean, and we haven't really evolved that much,
That's right.
you know, at all. Our technology has, you know. So I mean, you know, it means you can keep on making movies forever because we keep on making the same stupid mistakes, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I mean, so when I was doing research on you, Bruce, I mean, from beer to your own radio show to being a pilot, I mean, I can't. Where do I start?
Don't forget the fencing. He's also on the British national fencing team.
So he's a fence. You're a fencer as well. I mean, you're obviously a unique soul, and you're trying to try a lot of different things, because a lot of people on this planet, we're like, I'm the lead singer of Iron Maiden. I'm good. I don't got to do anything else for the rest of. I'm solid. But you constantly are always searching and looking and experimenting. What brings you to do all these other things?
I'm just curious about how they work. I want to, and the only way to find out how something really works is to internalize it. And by internalize it, what I mean is it's very easy to be superficial about something. Not a bad thing being superficial. It's just like I take an interest in blah, and I do it for one day a week for an hour and a half, and you know, I'll never really be any good at it, because you can't be any good at it if that's all you do. It's my hobby, and then I'll give it up and find another hobby and blah, blah, blah. And that's great. But that pisses me off. I mean, me. Other people, fine, whatever. You know, I'm not going to condemn other people for doing what they do. But it seems to me to be pointless to invest your time in things at which you are not really passionate about. So the alternative is to be passionate about everything you do in some way, which means that, you know, you end up having to make commitments, because that passion means there's a constant thirst to want to know more. What makes this beast tick, right? What is it really like to be in, for example, you know, when I learned to fly, I started to learn to fly doing little chugga-boom airplanes, and right, okay, great. Lots of musicians learn to fly, lots of actors learn to fly. And then it got more. I thought, well, it'd be really nice to go and fly myself around to some gigs. Then it becomes more complicated, because you've got to actually get there, and depending on the weather, and you've got to have more qualifications and blah, blah, blah. We're shooting a kind of a, not exactly a documentary. So it was a TV special that we did with an illusionist, right? A guy called Simon Drake. So Maiden are shooting this thing, and he comes on, he does some, like, you know, magic type stuff. So we're filming, and the my tour manager comes up to me and says, the lighting cameraman, you'd like a chat with him, because he's a pilot too. I went, oh, okay. So I go up and I say, hey, how you doing? I fly little airplanes. He says, and he was a Scottish guy, and he was very abrupt, and it was like always, you know, what's the time? Busy, busy. What kind of license you got? I pulled it out, and he goes, one of those. Get one of these. And I went, what's that? He goes, that's commercial pilot's license. Airplanes, you've got to take some car parts to Germany tonight. I'll see someone on a bike. Whoop. And I went, what the fuck was that? You know,
exactly. I can relate to that right now.
And he, so this guy, I went, but you're a lighting cameraman for film stuff. He goes, yeah, but in the evening, I fly car parts to Germany and back for a cargo company. And I'm just like, pilots, I are actually a little bit strange. So I started down getting my airline pilot's qualifications.
Yeah.
And I became an American flight instructor as well while I was at it.
Why not?
And so I had 2 sets of licenses going. And then finally I got to the point where I thought there's so much more to learn here the only way to learn this, to dig really deep, is to get a job and actually be a professional pilot.
Obviously.
Okay. And not being John Travolta and being unable to afford to buy my own jet, I thought, I got to get a job and fly somebody else's. So, believe it or not, that's what happened by a series of chance and happenstance, and in much the same way that I ended up getting a job in Iron Maiden was actually how I ended up getting a job in an airline. So I worked as an airline pilot, 6,500 hours of it for nearly 15 years, flying 757s, 737s, and eventually a 747.
But you were still in Maiden.
Yeah, I used to take unpaid leave so I could go on tour.
I mean, I can't. I'm like, what do you say? What do you say? What do you say about that? I don't even, and that's not even including
hair back then, you know.
That's, I mean, it's okay. So, and that's not, and then you of course have a Discovery Channel show, flying heavy metal. Then you have your own radio show on the BBC for a few years as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And then you started a beer company.
Well, we brew. We're up to over 30 million pints now of Trooper, and so it's just done quite well. But again, something I love. But do the things you love. Do the things you love and that you're passionate about. You know.
Yeah.
So I kind of created the flavor profile of the first beer we did, and I have a big say in all of them now. Mm-hmm. And we have a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, there's one going to be launched in America soon, which is, I think, going to be quite exciting. So, you know.
So the thing is, one thing I've noticed about you, Bruce, is that a lot of musicians, and like we've all heard the stories of the broke musicians who can't make a living and or washed up, and they never figured out like a business. You have a very entrepreneurial side. I mean, Maiden, the merch for Maiden is legendary. I mean, you guys still are selling merch like out the door, I'm assuming, right?
No, the merch is huge, but like all things, Maiden World is its own. Maiden World is its own world. It's got its own parameters, its own things in terms of like when you talk about from a business perspective, and obviously there is a business perspective. We try as a band, we kind of exclude ourselves from that. Mm-hmm. Because when you have to create something, you have to be pure. You can't artificially shoehorn in concepts just because some marketing guy has whispered in your ear. Right. It'd be a really good idea if you wrote a song about a pair of sneakers. You know what I mean? There are some bands that would do that sort of thing, but not us. So we try to just cordon off that business thing and put ourselves in a bubble whenever we go and create. And we have no idea what's going on in the outside world during that period. It's kind of a magic time, really. So you need to go back to being having a childish enthusiasm for things. Actually, I think all of us need to do that. I mean, that's actually a part of every creative act. But I mean, and moving on from music, I mean, I'm moving on from music to film and storytelling. I started out not really ever imagining that I could be a musician. I started out on stages because I was really I was in every school play and everything and blah, blah, blah. And then I went on to my next school, which is where I saw my first rock concerts and directed some things, did some street theatre, did all kinds of bit bobs. I would have been a terrible actor, right? Because I could never, ever take it quite seriously enough. And I was always sort of ad-libbing, and people would go, "No, that's not the line," alas, poor Godfrey, I knew him well. Not Godfrey, Yorick, no. Okay. So, um, so then I wanted to be a drummer. And the reason I wanted to be a drummer was because to me, a drummer was this kinetic energy that a drummer had. But at the same time, I saw somebody like Keith Moon as almost being a front man at the same time. Anyway, I couldn't figure out how to get a drum kit past my parents without explaining it was a lot of big dustbins and I was a very tidy sort of chap, which I wasn't. So then I discovered, purely by accident, that I could sing a little bit. And I thought, singing. Singing. And I thought, what? Obviously, I was inspired by a lot of bands. But I came up with the idea, a bit like the Marquis de Sade, right? The Marquis de Sade was locked up for most of his life and wrote his madness down on pieces of toilet paper. That's how all that crazy stuff was written. Because in this febrile, fevered state, he had no access. He was completely cut off. So he invented this crazy world. In much the same way, I didn't get to see any of the bands that I admired, brought up on, because I was at a boarding school. And so I missed out on Zeppelin and Purple and Sabbath and never saw any of them. So I invented what I thought they did on stage. And what they actually did was, when I first saw them in real life afterwards, I went, that's it? They just stand around. They don't fly through the air. They're not doing cartwheels. They're not being in that. What? That's it? You know? And I was like, can't be like that. I have to be like, throw shapes and tell stories. And the way I think about music, whenever I'm singing lyrics or, whatever it is, I'm closing my eyes and there's a movie going on in my head. And all I'm describing with the tune, I'm describing the movie. Mm-hmm. And I create that movie for every single song. So I could argue there's actually a long-form video for every Iron Maiden song I've ever sung. And it exists in my head. And that's what the story that you're giving to the audience. And for me, it's not acting, it's performing. But there's elements of it which are similar. Because when you look at a screen actor that's very charismatic, you want to know what's going on in that person's head, in their soul. Doesn't matter what he says or she says, you're thinking, why? Why? I want to go deeper into what makes you who you are. And that backstory going on is what I think separates some bands from other bands.
And some actors from other actors.
Yeah, it's because anybody can stand up and sing the words. Mm-hmm. But singing the words with meaning and something, when people look at somebody and go, wow, where are you? Where is that guy? He's somewhere else when he's singing those words. Where are you? I want to know where you are. And that's what draws people in. So you start off from that perspective, and then therefore everything becomes story related. Mm-hmm.
Can I mention one thing? There's a Maiden song off Number of the Beast called Hallowed Be Thy Name. Mm-hmm. And it's told from the perspective of a man in a cell on his own who's about to be hung or executed or guillotined or whatever at 5 a.m. And he's thinking about his life. And the way, when I remember seeing Maiden and Bruce perform that song on that tour, I think in '83, and it was like a theatrical performance. Bruce stands on the stage and he becomes that man. And it sends chills through your... It's not just the music and the song. It's the whole that character of the man about to die.
And that's a really easy to do as well.
Right.
So Bruce, though, I mean, when you're creating... Because that's creation. I mean, that is absolutely creation when you're up there and you're creating these things. I touched on this with Sasha in our interview in regards to the almost channeling, allowing it to flow through you from some other source. I think two things. One, I think you're becoming very open and transparent about where you are. So you're letting people see inside of you when you're going through that in any part of your creative process. But do you believe that there's something that you're kind of like bringing in through you, and that you're just basically a vessel at that point in the game? So very much like a writer does, or an actor does, or
totally. I mean, you're not in total control of what's going on, but you are a reflector.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean that you take 15,000 people in a stadium, 30,000, 40,000. I mean, and you have to take that energy, absorb it, and reflect it back in the right way. Which is one reason why I, after coming off stage, and I've done obviously all kinds of different performances. I've actually performed to one person, right?
Mm-hmm.
At a pub somewhere, and we went on stage, not in Iron Maiden, and there was one guy in the pub in a ballroom, and he got a chair and put it in the middle of the ballroom and sat on the chair.
Oh
right?
My God!
So,
he's like, I paid my ticket, entertain me.
I'm going to see this. So we go on and we start running around. I thought, what? There has to be a way of doing this. So I went over to the bar and bought the guy a drink, and I came back and I said, and we stopped one of the songs, and I said, listen, I want you to have this beer. I said, just so as you know that we really care about you, and we're going to do this all just for you. And then we all relaxed, and because you see so many bands, and they go out, and they want to be at like Madison Square Gardens, but you're not in Madison Square Gardens, dude. So they come on and they go, "Hello, Cleveland!"
Right.
People, what the fuck is he talking about? Who's he looking at? Some of the best advice I ever got was from Ian Gillan from Deep Purple, and he said, "Front row, look them in the eyes and mean it." And the human eyeball carries so well, it from the screen. The eyes have so much power, and it's incredible. I mean, you stare at some female's butt, and she's 100 yards away. I guarantee you, she's going to turn around and go, "Who the fuck are you staring at my ass?" Because we're programmed to detect that. And so if you can throw that if you have the ability to project that, I say it's like having a balloon in your head that you inflate to fill the room. And as you get more practiced, you find it easier to inflate your balloon. And by the time you get to a stadium, you can inflate your balloon to encompass the entire stadium. And then you come off stage at the end of it, and you have to somehow find the mechanism to stick a pin in it and have it go.
Because you can't keep it going.
Because you can't even get through the door with a balloon that size.
Right.
You just have to find a mechanism to come down.
Yeah. What is that mechanism for you? Because I can imagine like playing in front of tens of thousands of people, and you're in this arena and you do it night after night after night. When you cut off, like, okay, guys, good night, and you walk backstage, you're just like, oh.
But can I say also, like I saw Maiden and Bruce do a show in Rock in Rio, which was how many? 100 and...
No, 300,000.
Sorry, 300,000
people.
300,000.
There's very few people, but there's very few people in the world who will ever stand in front of that kind of crowd ever. How do you come down from that in a healthy way? Because look how many bands have been destroyed because they can't get off that high.
Yeah. So the answer is, how do you come down from 300,000 people? Well, the short answer on that particular instance is you don't.
Right.
So I was still up at 6 a.m. hadn't gone to bed at all, and I went out. We'd been kind of prisoners in our hotel because the whole place was under siege from all the fans, like proper Beatlemania. Not just us, it was all the other bands.
Sure.
All hotel. And so we went. I went out on I guess it was Copacabana Beach in Rio, and there was nobody there. I mean, everybody was at the festival, and there was nobody on the beach. And it was 6 a.m. and the sun was up, and it was just getting nice and roasty. So I went out onto the beach and I sat down on the beach, and I looked to my left, and there was Brian May from Queen doing exactly the same thing. Yeah, he hadn't been to bed either, and because they went on after us. So that was a fairly extreme example, but you cannot tolerate that. You do implode. You have to find a mechanism to deal with it. Now, in my case, I have a routine. So, end of the show, off stage, we normally leave straight away. So we've got a car journey, and then it probably, in this case, nowadays we go by aeroplane because we can afford to, or the old days it would have been a bus. But either way, on there, chill out, 2 hours, 3 hours, get to the hotel room. I've still got another, hour and a half of sitting up watching rubbish late night TV. Take a really long shower for like an hour. Just sit there and just drip, and then finally go to bed and try and make sure that your hotel room has blackout curtains, because I want the full 8-9 hours, Mm-hmm. And that's it. And then just get up slowly. You have to live a bit like a monk if you're a singer, because you can't be going blah 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 all the time, because you've got to rest your voice, etc. Boring but true. And that's how you deal with it. And I go to the show and I have a routine. And, I do this, I eat that, I do that. I go and have a lie down, have a snooze. I get up, boom, on we go. And it all is there to serve the 1 hour 45, 1 hour 50 that you're on that stage. Your entire existence is there to serve that moment.
And to serve the audience.
And to serve the audience.
Same as making
obviously. Yeah, exactly. But I love when you said that you're a reflector, because I've never really heard it put that way before. I've always looked at it as much more of a conduit, like you just come in and it flows through you. But the way you're looking at it is like, well, I have an audience I'm trying to service. So the energy comes to me, I internalize it, and I shoot it back out. And that way, so it's you're almost the filter essentially coming.
Yeah, yeah. Can't if you try and take on that energy and puff yourself up with it, right. you will end up exploding, because you can't encompass all of it. And no amount of taking strange chemicals to make your mental state even more agitated will be able to control it at all. So you have to get a mechanism having it come down. And the best thing, of course, is if your motivation is pure. Because if your motivation is pure, in other words, you're just serving the story, you're serving the music, you're serving the audience. Mm-hmm. That's pure. So actually, you're not conflicted. It's not your ego. Yeah, we've all got egos, okay? Mm-hmm. We'd all fold up and collapse in a blob on the floor. But you're not going on there going, I am here because I am, but no, I am here because I have some great stories to tell you, and I want to see your faces react, and I'm going to throw that back at you, just to know that that we know that you're there. So it's a two-way street. The guy that first said reflector to me was the late, great music producer, Martin Birch. Mm. And I won't go into his discography. We'd be here all night. But he was just astonishing. And he was a childhood hero of mine. And I ended up making records with him. And he turned around my head in terms of singing, because I thought I was a pretty good singer till I met Martin. And then I realized there was a whole nother level of meaning. I'll give you an example. So I'm there doing a song, 666, Number of the Beast, right? And it starts off with some kind of whispered, spooky lines. I left alone. My mind was blank. I needed time to think, to get the memories from my mind, right? And I go in and say, yeah, I can sing that. Jeez, it's like low down. I left alone. My mind was blank, And I go in and I deliver the lines, and he goes, yeah. No. Let's do it again. I said, what's wrong with them? I said, like, they're out of tune. What? They're out of time. What? He says, no. He said, I don't hear it. I don't hear it. We went round for a couple of hours, and I'm thinking, can we just get on with the rest of this song? I'm just really fed up with singing these first two lines. And I ended up throwing a chair across the studio and getting really angry and like, what do you want? And he came in and he said, we're going to come back and do this tomorrow. I went, what? And he goes, yeah. He goes, let me tell you a story about another great singer, Ronnie James Dio, that he worked with. Ronnie did an album with him called Heaven and Hell. And he said to me, I had the same problem with Ronnie. I mean, really? The guy's one of the greats of all time. And he goes, yeah. He said, but, the opening lines to the title track, Heaven and Hell, are, sing me a song, you're a singer. Right? That's my Ronnie impression. Mm-hmm. And Ronnie came along and sang the words, and he said, no, I don't hear it. And Ronnie goes, well, what's wrong with it? It's not out of time, it's not out of tune. He said, no. What I don't hear is that you're a singer, right, Ronnie? And Ronnie goes, yeah. He said, so this is your entire life in 2 lines. And Ronnie was like, yeah. How do I do that? Right? And I don't know how you do it. You just have to surrender and not even think about it. And that, in the end, that's what happened with Number of the Beast. And he was right, God damn it. That's the, not infuriating thing. That's the moment of enlightenment when you go, oh my God, I think I'm beginning to get it.
Are you talking about a level of commitment and a level of?
It's a level of you're channeling something. The words, the notes and the words are stuff that anybody can do. That's karaoke singing. But it's when you go to the level of what your subconscious is doing, and you can't control that. You can't go, hey subconscious, hey subconscious, the devil gave us to you, and you can't control that. You have to kind of open it out and just go, think of nothing, and then sing the lines. And really hard to do, infuriating hard to do. And once you're into it, you're on a roll, and you don't have to worry about it. But Martin, to go back to the original the original thing about reflectors, Martin had a bee in his bonnet about quite a lot of other producers. And some producers who he thought were just awesome. And the main difference was, and there was one producer in particular, I won't name him because, but basically the kind of producer that would turn up and say to a band, okay, so we're going to make a record. So you just hang around for a while and I'll make the record. And I'll bring in all these guys, and then you can come in and you play a few bits that I'll tell you what to play, and then that will be your record, and it will be a huge success. And you know what? It probably is. And Martin despised those people. Because he would work only with bands who he thought had character and integrity and were worth something and were different. And he said some producers are like puppet masters. They turn up. And I guess it's like directors in movies. Some directors are puppet masters. Hey, everybody dance on the string. Everybody dance on the string. You do that. You do that. I'm God, right? And some directors and some producers just hold up a mirror to the script and the situation and the actors and go, your movie, this artist, what you see is real. It's what you get. Well, that's it. And if you hold up the mirror and the stuff in the mirror is crap, then it's a crap movie. You know, so you know,
yeah,
interesting.
You know,
applying to music and screenwriting and filmmaking, absolutely.
Yeah, and any endeavor.
Like, it's really interesting. Like, even as a writer, the best directors I've worked with, obviously watching Steven Spielberg work, or, you know, the other Andrew Niccol, all the different people I've worked with, the best directors say very little. They just witness the emotional events that are unfolding before them, and they do a little bit of directing.
Yeah, well,
but
I'll tell you a quick story. I'll tell you a quick Steven Spielberg story. I had Ed Burns on the other day on the show, and he was on Saving Private Ryan. And for the first 2 weeks, that whole young cast with Tom, you know, that had, you know, Vin Diesel and all these other amazing actors, Steven never gave anybody direction. And these were all young actors, so they were very insecure. And then finally, on the 15th day, they do a scene, and Steven goes, no, you got to do this, this, and this. And then at lunch, they all walk up to him and go, Steven, why today did you give us the thing? He goes, because you weren't being honest. You weren't being true. You were being raw. I didn't say anything because I didn't need to, because you guys were tuned in. But the second you got out of tune, I went in there and tweaked it.
As a great producer, I mean, a great music producer is exactly that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the there's always an internal story trying to get out if you let it, you know, and that goes the same. I mean, obviously getting around to script writing. I mean, my adventures in script writing came with started off with a film called The Chemical Wedding. So we made I got to know a guy called Julian Doyle, who was the editor for all the Python films, Life of Brian. He did Brazil. He did all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And he was second unit director, so he used to finish a lot of the movies. So all the De Niro sequence and everything in Brazil, that was all directed by Julian because Terry was sick and so on and so forth. And he was kind of like the film guru for Python. So he did a video for us called Can I Play with Madness? And we got one of the Monty Pythons in it. And I was sitting chatting to Julian, and he said, you know, Maiden should do a movie. I went, yeah, but that's never going to happen because, you know, Rob the manager, and I'm really not sure how we would work it. No. I said, but there is a guy that nobody's ever done a movie about that's peripherally, you know, and that's this crazy, whacked out, culturally significant black magician called Aleister Crowley, right? Who created the Do What Thou Wilt and basically had his identity stolen by Anton Sandor LaVey, Church of Satan. They all just copied Crowley. He's in numerous films in various representations. I said, and he had this crazy, whacked out life involving sexual magic, drugs, meditation, Eastern stuff, you know. And this is in the 1920s and 30s.
Jesus, right? Yeah. Ahead of his time.
He invented the counterculture. That's why he's on the cover of Sgt. Pepper, right? Mm-hmm. So we went and started doing this. And I said, well, and I started writing the script. So we started out, and what I did was adapt a book. Somerset Maugham, the novelist, wrote a book called The Magician, in which one of the characters was based on Aleister Crowley. Mm-hmm. So I kind of looked at adapting that book. And we got into about the third or fourth iteration of the script. And we sold it to Walter Yetnikov, who was did Ruthless People, but he was also the head of CBS Records. Mm-hmm. He's the one that sold it to Sony. So he started his own production company, and we sold it to him. So I was going up talking films with Walter Yetnikov and stuff like that, and hearing some crazy stories, you know. So this is all good stuff. And then he decided not to make films, so very honorably, he gave us the film back, and we'd had rewrites, and I'd had the rewrite experience in which One guy tried to rewrite it in a very bizarre way, and then we found out that he hadn't written it. He'd given it to his buddy to write, and it was absolute, So we went back, and I said to Julie, I said, why don't we try and make the damn thing ourselves? And Julie went, yeah, okay. He said, but we can't afford to do it, period. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we can't afford, if we're going to do it ourselves, period is going to be so expensive. He said, we can't afford to do that. I said, well, how are we not going to do it, period? The guy died in 1947. And that's when your subconscious works, and you get this little moment, you go, unless we bring him back in the present day. So the movie starts in 1947 on the day he dies.
Okay.
And now we have to find a mechanism by which we can bring him back, like Jesus, for 3 days in the present day, and say, what would he get up to? Well,
that's interesting.
So that's the movie. I mean, we got the actor Simon Callow.
Yeah.
Simon Callow played Aleister Crowley in it. And the movie has many, 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 many flaws, but I learned an awful lot about movie making, an awful lot about directors, and an awful lot about, what should or should not have gone in my script. And, so I learned an awful lot from that experience. Made the film, it's a curiosity in the annals of filmmaking, I think, but
as Bruce talks about this, it's really interesting because as you know, Bruce and I are working together on a project right now, and it is like working with this is not working with a singer in a band who's suddenly coming into the world of film. This is working with a storyteller and a writer who's made films and who really understands the rhythms and structures of how they work, which was really like completely unexpected, because I didn't
you thought,
well, I just didn't really understand how much experience Bruce has had.
I got 750 pages of rewrites on Chemical Wedding, including starting again from the beginning.
So that's basically a film school, a master's degree in film.
But not only that, it's also hundreds of songs. It's also several books. It's also the storytelling thing is developed.
What gets me is I actually think that if you're involved in putting words on paper, virtual or otherwise, I think that screenplay writing is the toughest discipline of all of them by a country mile. Because I've written an autobiography, I've written 2 comic novels, I've written songs, right? Writing books is an awful lot of perspiration and about 10% inspiration, because that's the truth. Whereas screenwriting is 100% inspiration and 100% perspiration. Because to get that 100% inspiration, you just have to grind through it and refine and cut and cut and cut,
and stick it into this little box that is the platform and the format of description. You can't just write 5 pages on how the house smells. You have to say that in a word.
Some famous sculptor,
Michelangelo, I think it was.
About the sculptor, the guy
Rodin.
Rodin.
He hacks away what's not the statue.
Rodin. You're right.
And I read that quote, and I was just like, yes, that's exactly what you do when you're trying to write a screenplay.
Well, we all know if we read a script, we know within 10, 15 pages, it's brutal. Like, immediately, have they distilled it down to its essence? Is it the essence of what it needs to be? Is it dramatized? It's brutal. I think Bruce is right.
I always say it's other than a haiku is probably one of the most difficult things it actually do.
So we have a couple of things we're working on at the moment. I mean, bizarrely, I was actually the last time I started thinking about doing anything movie-wise was back in that script I gave you that we gave to
we gave to Kurt.
We gave to Kurt. And that was 2010 or something else like that. So basically, I put all this script stuff and put it all in a drawer and go on. Okay, forget that. Then I bump into Sasha again, purely by chance. who says
Not by chance. Not by chance. Not by. No, there's a reason.
So then let me just get you just a very brief background. Okay, so I'm a 15-year-old heavy metal fan, 15. Mm-hmm. And I meet this guy called the Right Honourable Phil Harvey. He was an English aristocrat who was known as the Lord of Metal. Now, this guy was a total drug-taking lunatic, right? And he used to have these parties at his Mews house in Marylebone, in Clark's Mews. And at these parties, you would see members of Twisted Sister, members of Thin Lizzy, Phil, all these crazy people would be there. And Anvil, who I knew, took me and introduced me to Phil, and he knew it. So the first time I met Bruce, and he doesn't remember because he was a rock star and I was a fan, I was thrown into the back of a Jeep that Phil Harvey, the Right Honourable, had come from Zanzibar on safari, driven it into London. And so I'm this little freakish 15-year-old kid in the back of the Jeep, and there's Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden. And I ended up having a chat with him. So I met him as a fan. He doesn't remember, but I remember because I met Bruce. Anyway, so we met then, and I'd seen Maiden many times. Then years later, when Anvil came out, I can't remember how we hooked up.
I can't remember
but
either.
Somehow we were connected through the film. And somehow we ended up in LA, me and Bruce going to dinner with Jimmy Caan, as in James Caan of The Godfather, and my wife. And we had this rather entertaining dinner. And I remember dropping Bruce back in Santa Monica. We had this crazy, and anyway, whatever. I won't say the story about my wife. But we had a really, really good time. And Bruce came over to my house and Anvil were there. But I was fascinated with him. And we were talking and I was like, he said, I'm working on a film project. Mm-hmm. Maybe one day we'll produce something together. But, like those encounters with people.
Sure.
We lost each other for a few years. Then what happened was this past Christmas, I was sitting around at home, a few days after Christmas. I look at BBC4, which always has the best documentaries and music programs. There's suddenly a documentary called Scream for Me, Sarajevo about Bruce Dickinson. And I was like, fucking hell. I watched this documentary and it totally blew me away. And it was so moving and unexpected and vital and crazy and insane. And, these and it's the story of essentially of Bruce and his band at the time going behind enemy lines under siege into Sarajevo via the UN and armed transports, etc., to play a rock show for all these young kids who are basically being slaughtered. And who were in a kind of shooting gallery where they're being there. So I saw that you've got to see the documentary. So I saw the documentary and I thought Bruce was so incredible. It was just like so moving to me that they would be that insane to do it. And also how inspiring they were to these kids. Bruce said something in the documentary about, I just only hope that I could be big enough, as big as they needed me to be, because they were. And there was this incredible stories of people coming from the front lines to attend the show. And, so anyway, I thought to myself, fuck, I really want to find Bruce. There's a movie. I thought there's a movie. This is so crazy. And I found Bruce. I don't know how I found him. And we met. And it was like, okay, we're going to pick up where we sort of talked 10 years ago. And I said, there's a movie here. You're a writer. Shall we explore it? And we've been working on it. And behind us, you can see the note cards where we're sort of working on. Behind us. Yeah. But the point being,
don't show the big board. Sorry, just don't show
the big board. I mean, I could see everything. I know the entire story now. I mean, come on.
So, but like what I'm saying to you is, it's really coming together. It's such an interesting story and so unexpected. And like here I am, a 15-year-old Iron Maiden fan.
Right.
40 years later, or whatever, 35 years later, working with one of my heroes on this extraordinary story of his.
Well,
about
but that basically seems to be your life, Sasha. That's what you do.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you just work with your heroes. That's just your career.
The cool thing about the film that we're making, is that it's actually not about me or about the band. It's that there are more important actors in there who you follow, and we're the excuse for the film.
But Bruce, I have to ask you. When I heard about Scream for Me, Sarajevo, and when Sasha told me the whole story behind it, the only question in the back of my head is, why in God's green earth would you go into a war zone to play a concert? And I would really love to know and I understand why you were doing it in the sense of, but I just like because from outside in looking in, it's insane. It's insane, but I know there's a much deeper meaning there. But why did you do it?
Never done it before.
No, there has to be more than that. It can't just be like, because I haven't done a lot of stuff either, but I'm not going into a war zone for it. So like, but what was the deeper reasoning for it? Like you were, I mean, obviously you were there to be of service to those kids and to bring some light into that darkness.
We had no idea who we were going to go and play in front of, right? Not clearly. It was all done in the most bizarre way. I mean, I got a phone call from the head of a magazine called Kerrang, it's a heavy metal magazine, right? And the guy goes, look, somebody's called us from Sarajevo, some guy from the UN, and he wants to know if you would be interested in going in and doing a show. And I said, what? He said, well, we asked Motorhead and they said no, and we asked Metallica and they said no. And I said, oh, and so now you're left having to go down to the lowest common denominator, which is me, huh? And I went, well, okay. I mean, Sarajevo. I mean, it's hang on, it's still a proper war over there, isn't it? And he goes, oh yeah, but don't worry. He said it's all sorted out. You'll be safe and secure. You just go there, do the show, and then you'll be out like the same day. I went, okay, this sounds kind of like an adventure, All right, yeah. So very naive. We turn up.
Very, very naive.
We get to Split, which is the kind of staging post. We get there, and the guy goes, no, the UN have said, no, they don't want to do any concerts there because you're going to upset people, upset the opposition. And so here's your boarding passes, get on the plane and go home. And we just decided not to.
As a sane person would, as a sane human being would.
Yeah, so we decided not to. And we said, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? We're going to end up staying in Split for a week. The beer's cheap. The weather's not too bad. We'll find somewhere to play a gig, and then we'll go home. Actually, the worst thing that could happen is you end up dead.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Subsequently discovered. But, as you go through, I mean, but we did it. And what the voyage of discovery, it was life-changing stuff. For me and for the guys in the band. And we were only there for 4 days, right? Imagine what it's like being there and living through it for years, okay? So somebody's already given me a version of a script, having seen the thing, they came up with a script. And I just said, no, this is not the right kind of script. Because it was all about the band.
Yeah, and you're the protagonist, right?
It's not about the band. The band is the band is the vehicle for the rest of it. The band is the excuse for everybody who matters to turn up. It's the lens through which you see everybody else, the crazy life that existed around there. So that's the script that we are trying to write,
And what's interesting is it's seen through the eyes of the kids attending the concert and those relationships, and also what it meant in the middle of having your entire life and your family and your world shattered, to be able to have Bruce Dickinson of Iron Maiden. They were so excited. It was so important. It was so like a mythical thing for them to get to, and still to this day, it remains an event there that really has not been forgotten. It was a really, I wouldn't say a turning point event, but it was a seminal event in their, in their youth. And because, this is it's the most extreme version of what music is to all of us. It's our soul. It's when I listen to music that I love, it's my personal time. It's a nourishing, healing thing. This was, Bruce told me, and you can see in the documentary that's well worth watching, because it is brilliantly done, is that, like in most shows, there'll be a line of people outside, waiting to get their tickets, to clip to come in. This was groups of 3 and 4 people running from across the street while being shot at to get into the show. This was not just a rock show. This was an event that occurred in a war. And I thought to myself, how fucking beautiful. There's something poetic about the story, and it's Bruce's life. And I just thought, let's see what we can pull together, and that's what we do.
And I think I don't mean to cut you off, Bruce, but that thing that you said earlier, or what Sasha said about you, that you said was like, I hope I'm big enough for them for this show. I mean, I don't know what kind of pressure there is for a musician normally to put on a good show, but I have to believe that if you're being shot at as a concert goer, you're expecting a hell of a show if I'm risking my life for it. What kind of pressure is that on you? I mean, what were you thinking when you were about to go on stage? I mean, you know what's going on outside. What the heck's going on through your head?
It's just really hot. Everything seems to work, and there's one light.
That's it.
Light. A white light, on or off. You know, and that was it. I mean, really, it was like, you know, we could have been like the high school band at the prom, you know, with everything, but the circumstances meant that it was not like that at all, you know. But the great thing is that, I mean, there was at no point did I ever feel the urge to go on stage and go, let me tell you about the war, you know. Let me tell you how awful this war is. You know, we should stop this war.
No.
You know, fucking liberal assholes do that. You know what I mean? What you want is you want to go on there and you want to go, let's all just fucking rock out. Let's get energy. Let's be positive. Let's have something to live for. Not some proselytizing lecture from somebody that, you know, really wants to be, you know, a member of some committee in the UN or some bullshit like that. You know, you need all wants to be highly regarded on CNN. You know what I mean? It's just like, no. This is about being visceral, you know. That's what they came for, and that's what we had to give them. It would have been dreadful, you know, to do. I hate those things. And one of the reasons I loved it was because it was pure.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's very hard to recreate or repeat that experience, or that having done it to that depth of integrity.
Right.
I'm not sure how you do that. You don't do that again, you know.
And if you see, and can I also suggest that people can look up Scream for Me Sarajevo and watch the documentary?
Oh, absolutely.
And you'll see the live concert footage, and you get the feeling that Bruce is talking about. It's conveyed, like how intense an experience it was, how important an experience was, not just but for you guys. Totally different.
No, I mean, this was just before Christmas, right? And so the complete dislocation of being in a war zone 1 minute and then with a big hangover arriving back in a kind of cold, misty London about 2 days before Christmas, and just looking at the realities of people. And people, the first thing I noticed, bizarrely, because I came back on the train from where we landed with the Royal Air Force, and came back on the train, and I thought I can't go home yet because I'm still there. I can't go home.
No.
I went and I sat on a bench outside the train station, outside Paddington train station, and I just sat there for about a half an hour, just watching people drive up and down. Wasn't much traffic, but the thing that struck me the most, I was like, traffic lights. I was like, I've just come from a place where if you stopped in the middle of the street, you would be shot by a sniper, and yet here people are, the light's gone amber. I have to. My life is run by traffic lights. You know, we have this completely false sense of security in our societies, that everything is run by traffic lights. Traffic lights will always work. If you stop at the traffic light, then everything will be good. You know,
You'll be safe. All right.
You get a ticket. You know, but no, that you know, our society hangs by a thread, because you see what it can dissolve into so radically and so quickly. It's scary. So yeah, traffic lights.
But I just want to touch on something really quickly. I think when you said that there was that concert was so pure, that whole experience was so pure. As creatives, and I'm going to ask you the same question, Sasha. As creatives, as people who, I mean, your chosen art forms. I mean, Bruce has 40 chosen art forms, but just mere mortals like you and me, Sasha.
But I don't want to get into that.
But generally, the chosen art form or the chosen expression of what our soul is, what our purpose is, what we're here to do. I know you've kind of mentioned this a little bit, Bruce, and talking about with other bands and other producers and getting your ego involved and all that stuff. It's when you're able to get all of that stuff out of the way, that's when it becomes honestly so easy. Much easier, I think, to just like let it flow as opposed to kind of trying to control the beast, if you will.
It's interesting. And this is one of the joys of working with Bruce on this story, because it's so close to him and he knows it so well, is we literally just sat at the table and started doing scene cards, different things that happen, and you lay out all the jigsaw pieces. And as soon as within 2 sessions of putting it up on the wall, the film began to tell us what it wanted to be and who it wanted to be about. And what you're talking about, that feeling of easiness of being directed, when that's happening so early on a project, it's a very, very good sign. And you just ride that. So we kind of already have an idea. It's like being in a lab and, the photo is being developed.
In front of you.
Already see what's happening. And you just got to stand out of the way and let it happen. And I find I get blocked and frustrated when I'm trying really hard to make something. But when you're just, listening for what it is. And that's sort of been happening from the start on this.
Yeah, I always like, if I get stuck or in analyzing things, again, I'm a picture sort of person. I like to think of an analogy of what it is we're doing with each individual project. And with Sarajevo, we came up with this thing. I went, hang on, this movie, if we imagine we're creating a human body with this movie, what is the spine of the picture? What or who is the spine of the picture? Everything wraps around the spine. All the appendages and limbs, they all work off the spine. What is the spine? And it was abundantly clear. We went, yep, that's it. Big spine. Starts at the top, ends at the bottom. Bang. And everything bolts onto that.
Yeah.
So once you've got that, you can sort of go, oh,
yeah.
And that's what it is. Any good film, I think, revolves around a certain core concept. You could call it a nugget or a theme or an idea. I'll give the example of Anvil, where I had 300 hours of footage of a documentary. I could have made 9 different films. And I was struggling in the edit to make the film. And I had to step out of it and I had to say, what is this film really about, right? And so what I came down to, I distilled it down to its essence. And I said, Anvil, the story of Anvil, is about cost of refusing to give up your dreams. That's the movie. It's all about the cost of refusing to give up your dreams. Every single scene in that film relates to that central nugget idea.
For the Sarajevo one?
I can't remember what we came up with.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Oh yeah, this is Bruce. This is the thing at the beginning of the film. That's right.
Yeah. So I said, we should write this. Some of this happened. Some of this might have happened. Some of this should never happen again.
Oh, what a great line! Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah. Put it back on the board.
That's great, but that encompasses the entire film.
There's your movie. That's the movie.
Yeah. That's the purpose of what we're doing. That's not just the theme. It's the description. It's the essence. It's why we're doing it, right?
Yeah.
Why we're doing it. So there's an element of, fantasy,
Amazing.
but really it's the story of these kids. And so you're lucky when you get that kind of clarity. Sometimes it takes a bit of work, but once you have that spine, and everything can fold in around it, that's usually when there feels like there's integrity in the film, or that it's integrated.
I mean, the other one we're working on is so totally different. It's which is a script. It's an insane script I did, which is like as close as you could get to it is a kind of like a very dark Jojo Rabbit type thing initially.
Oh, wow.
We sent it, and that was 2010, right? So So anyway, he read the script and he went, yeah, I'm going to send it to Kurt. So we sent it to Kurt Sutter and he went, you know what, there's something in this, but Act 3 is a mess. I went, yeah, that's because there is no Act 3. It's just a mess. So I was kind of almost, the first 30 pages is cool. And then the next sort of like 30 pages is, yeah, okay. And then the last 30 pages is like, oh, what happened there? Because the first 30 pages was actually planned, and I basically kind of free associated the film right the way through in one very, very long weekend.
Right.
And
as you do.
I'll just type it up, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it. So now I'm working on Act 3 of it, trying to Act 3, and in doing so, basically, effectively start again, because Act 3 informs Act 2, informs Act 1, and we're still the same subject matter, but the crucial thing was we got loads and loads of bits of information all about the Second World War, all kinds of weird stuff, and it's really easy to get lost in all of those great stories that are not the story you're going to tell. And it was just like, let's cut through it. What is the message we want to give about all this crazy stuff? And what's that message? How do we take something from World War II and relate it to
today,
right now?
Mm-hmm.
What's the message that links it to right now? So you get a moment where the audience will go, oh my God. Oh, that's now. Yeah. Wow. How did we end up in this place? And then we work it back. And you have all these characters who really existed. But to make the movie work, I said, you know what? Let's take, because we've got a bunch of characters and they're all basically male and they're all basically misogynists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, let's put a woman in this. And then the woman started to grow in stature. And now
the whole movie is about
her. Right?
So, the power of what if. The power of what if.
I also give, as you know, because there'll be many of your listeners and watchers who are writing partners. So mm-hmm. I work on my own. I work as a director. I work in partnership with Bruce now. And, we have all these different roles that we play. But I will say that working with a great partner, who has total commitment and total intensity, it just brings it out of you. Yeah. Like mm-hmm. Bruce is not giving up until this is fucking there. And so, if you're feeling like, oh, I'm feeling a bit exhausted, he'll fucking pull you up, man. And he'll just keep working.
Well, it's obvious, but
vibe, exactly the same thing he brings on stage. He brings in a writer's room. It's really amazing it's kind of unusual.
Oh. Well, no, Bruce is obviously a force.
From my point of view, it's like.
No. Obviously, Bruce is a force of nature. That's an obvious. Obviously, from his life and the life he's led and all the stories that even just the stuff we've talked about in this show, that alone you could just feel it. You can feel it coming off the screen. I'm across the world from you right now as we're recording this, and I can feel like I'm in the room with both of you, and I'm holding on just talking to you guys. How you're surviving, Sasha, is beyond me.
Look into the eyes.
Look into the eyes. Come in.
It's the number of the beast.
It's the number of the beast. No, it's fascinating. I want to ask you one last question, guys. I want to ask this to both of you. What advice would you give someone who is chasing that dream, but is scared to take that chance, to take that next step, the thing that's holding them back? What advice would you give them to that?
Yeah, you cannot be scared. You have no time to be. If you're standing, if you're standing in front of a firing squad, there's no point in being scared because you know what will happen next, right? But if you have a choice whether to run away, don't be scared. They might miss. You know what I mean? So what we do, we're afraid that if we take a chance, that something bad will happen. nothing bad will happen if you take a chance. I took a chance. I quit Iron Maiden. One at the height of our success, I walked away, came back 5-6 years later, learned a huge amount in the intervening time. So I don't regret doing it. But in the build-up to it, there was a quote from Henry Miller, which I'll paraphrase because I can't remember it exactly, right? And it was, all growth is an unpremeditated leap in the dark with no idea of where you are going to land. And I thought, that is the journey of an artist. That is an artist's life. You don't know what you're going to create until you create it. If you sit there going, I don't know what I'm going to create, so I'm not going to start, you'll never do anything. But you have to get, I mean, they're as simple as that. If you just say, I can't do it, and it's how can I put it? It might sound cruel and harsh, but you can't let yourself be afraid, even if you are. Admit it. Okay, I'm scared. Okay, fine. Next. I mean, it's just like
Bruce is actually right. Following on from that, that idea of being terrified and trying to make that irrelevant. It's all about commitment, right? It's like, there's that great, I think it's W.H. Murray has this quote. He's on a Himalayan expedition, and it's something along the lines. I'm going to do it horribly, but it's like, until one is committed, there is hesitancy, always ineffectiveness, and a chance to draw back. Boldness has action, magic, and power in it. And it's about fucking commit. We're all terrified, for fuck's sake. You know what I mean? It's just
we're all trying to figure it out. Yeah.
It's so important to write a terrible screenplay, because then you've written a screenplay. And that's you've got to write a screenplay. Like in Anvil, Lips, you see the world's most disastrous tour, and then I interview him afterwards, and I say to him, are you okay? And I said, you must be bitter. Everything you were promised turned out, not to be true. And he says, at least there was a tour for it to go wrong on.
Wow. What?
It's like, and I just think you have to have that fucking attitude, right? You're going to have failures. You're going to have missteps. You're going to welcome all of that shit. And it goes back to Miles Davis. There are no mistakes. There are no mistakes.
My dad gave me a bit of advice once, and because I used to, when I was a kid, for a while, I used to race go-karts, right? Do like competitive go-kart racing.
Of course you did, Bruce. Of course you did.
Right? So, and I had this really ancient, outdated go-kart. Everybody else had slicks that were this wide. Mine were like really shitty ones, Everybody had leathers, I had plastic, and it was just like, it was the crappiest, most outdated motor and everything else like that. And I was just like, grumpy 16-year-old going, look, Dad, I'm never going to win anything like this, And he goes, just finish. I went, what? He said, just finish every race. If you finish every race, you win something. You're bound to, because the rest of the track is going to be populated by whiz kids and idiots who are going to crash into each other, get themselves smashed up. Just stay in the race and finish the damn race.
Wow.
I thought, Dad, that's kind of a profound lesson.
Oh, it's so profound.
He's right. And I've got this shitty little trophy. I only did 3 races in my life. And from 1973, I've got this little wooden trophy with like a really rubbish thermometer that doesn't work anymore on it. And it's in pride of place because it's the only trophy I ever won. And it's the trophy I won because I finished a damn race and I ended up on the podium.
And by the way, ending up on the podium, let me just, for those people who are, smart, if you think there is no connection between that tiny trophy and then watching Bruce on stage command an audience of 300,000 people, you're wrong. There is an absolute sacred connection between those two. A micro event,
nature's cattle prod,
personal versus this thing that you look on the outside, you can't even conceive. And, and to be able to step into that with confidence comes from that trophy.
And also winning the second prize for the English competition.
Right. The second one, yeah, absolutely.
I won the second prize.
Second prize is important.
Yeah, and Nature's Cattle Prod, on you go.
Nature's Cattle Prod.
When I one tiny story, when I wrote my first screenplay, and I begged to meet a London agent. It was a terrible screenplay, 25 years ago, and I met this agent, and he sort of took a courtesy meeting, and he was this aristocratic, snobby English guy, and I met him, and I was very impressed because he was a big agent. He represented some people I was very impressed with, and he looked at me and he said, "I said, have you read the script?" So he said, "Have you thought about working in a different medium?" And but that was fuel.
Yeah.
That was fuel. And when I had my first film made, I fucking called that motherfucker up. And I thanked him. I said, "Thank you." I didn't say, "You miserable little bastard," but I thought it. I said, "Thank you," because that helped me. And it did. It helped me.
But that's the thing about life in general, is that another person takes that and just leaves and becomes a carpenter.
You can't do that.
Then it wasn't meant to be. It wasn't meant to be. But
it's also that person then 20 years later looks back and goes, "Why the fuck did I leave?"
And then becomes that angry, and they become angry and bitter, and they take it out on people, and that's all that kind of stuff. And so it all depends on. I always say this on I've said this a million times, that life is going to punch you in the face 1,000 times. I don't care who the hell you are. You're going to get punched in the face. It's about learning how to take the punch and keep going. And sometimes, as you get older, like Bruce said earlier, sometimes you figure out how to duck a couple times. And just the moment when you start figuring out how to duck all the times, it's over. like he said.
But it's also about attitude that you bring.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't again mean to embarrass Bruce, but the reality is he's got a booked out stadium tour next year. And he's in this room going, "I want to learn how to do this really fucking well."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's the attitude. That's the attitude. I want to get good at this, and it's going to take work, and there's going to be mistakes, and blah blah blah. And I'm in the same fucking process myself. And so it's the attitude that you bring to whatever you're doing is absolutely critical. Absolutely, you're going to get smashed. Well, of course you are, but that's just part of it. Makes you stronger. I'm hungry now.
Yes,
I know you've got to go.
I've got
all right, so listen, I want to thank both of you guys for being on the show. This has been eye-opening, amazing, remarkable, and I can't wait to see this movie. It's now your responsibility to get this thing made, because I need to see this movie. I'm definitely going to see the documentary. But Bruce and Sasha, thank you so much for being on the show and helping everybody.
Thanks for having us, Alex.
Live long and prosper.